I'm listening to you talk about this stuff, and you've developed this whole business plan in your head at a very young age. Do you realize, yes, you took the path of least resistance, right? Would you agree with that? That to get to your goal of that acceptance, this
Yeah,
seemed to
yeah,
be
yeah.
the fastest
No,
conduit.
you know what? I found out I was always good at everything. Like I was good at sports. You know what I'm saying? I was good academically. You know, I was good with girls. I was pretty much good at everything I did, but I wasn't great at anything. And you know, like when you're in high school and you're growing up and there's people that are just like great at something.
You got the jocks and you got, you know.
Yeah, and in comparison, you know, I was very versatile. So when I became the drug dealer, when I became the bad boy, that was like something
that you were the best at.
I could become the best at. And it was easy to do it.
Because I have a feeling, knowing you for a very short time and talking to you on the phone, that I have a feeling no matter what you did in life, you were going to be successful. Like there's certain people that are set out in this life to be successful, as long as they make the right moves. You chose drugs and you were ultra successful, but I'm pretty sure if you would have chose your current profession of writing and filmmaking, that you still would have been you would have been great at. Maybe take a little bit longer. And I see that in so many different people who go away to prison. And it takes them that moment of clarity, that time where they can just sit back, relax, collect their thoughts, and reorganize to get to there. But you were making, how much money do you think you were making a week on your best?
I had a 9-month run, probably like from 90 into 91 before I caught my Fed case, where I was probably making like 25, 30 grand a month profit.
Holy cow. And
as a 19, 20
I was going to say late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, as a 19, 20-year-old. So 9 months, you know, everything was a buildup. You know, I had that age, you know, like 13, 16, where I had all the realizations and I was kind of dabbling. And then I had like that age, like 16 to 19, where I was kind of getting the contacts. You know, I was getting the connections. All my friends were at different colleges. You know, I ended up by basically like 89, 90. I was supplying 15 colleges in 5 states on the East Coast with LSD and weed. And this is what I used to do. I just used to drive around, man. I had like a circle. You know, I would go down like 81 in Virginia. I would stop, you know, like, you know, VMU, you know, Virginia, you know, University of Virginia, Radford, you know, Virginia Tech, you know, Virginia Commonwealth, and then I would come up to Kentucky, like Eastern Kentucky, University of Kentucky. I would go into West Virginia University, which in Morgantown, which was like a huge fucking party school, you know, and then I would go into Pennsylvania and I would hit Penn State at State College, but then I would hit all the satellite campuses because Penn State has like 7 satellite campuses. Okay. So I would hit all those. Then I would come back down into Maryland, like University of Maryland, and then I would even go into DC and hit some of the DC schools, you know, and then like the Northern Virginia schools like George Mason. So I just used to like basically like drive around in these states and I would drop off weed. And a lot of times it was front because it was all people I went to high school with. I went to a real big high school in Northern Virginia called Robinson.
Say, you got to have like a contact at all these different places. You can't just pull up in your car and say, okay, weed for sale.
I'm Seth the weed guy. It doesn't work that way. But you had developed this business and you're probably living like a king. At 19 years old, 30 grand a month, you're living like a king. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. In 1990, so, you know, I mean, different, you know, 1990, I think 30 grand was
Did you
worth
buy yourself
a
a
lot
nice car? Or was it, did you
No,
be like a nonchalant car?
I had, I used to get like those, they had those Subaru, I used to get the Subaru turbo station wagons that said the 4-wheel drive on the side. So I had 3 of those. Those were like my smuggle, because I'm a drug smuggler. That's what I was. You know, I was a drug smuggler.
You graduated from pot dealer to drug smuggler.
Yeah, so, you know, because I would go, like I say, I would go to Kentucky and I would get weed. I would go to Texas and get weed. I would go down to Florida, like Fort Myers, and get weed. I would get stuff. I wouldn't drive from the West Coast, but I would get stuff, the LSD and the mushrooms and the Humboldt County bud. I would get it sent, you know, from the West Coast, you know, in smaller amounts, you know. But like I would say, I would drive down to Texas. I would pick up like 100 pounds, you know, 150 pounds. I would go down to Fort Myers. Fort Myers, like a lot of people don't know Fort Myers. Fort Myers was a big drug port in Florida. I used to get a lot of weed out of there.
So how eventually you're riding high, you're doing this great business. There had to come a time where the government's looking at you because you're moving a lot. There's eyes on you. So when's the first time that you got the inkling that something was maybe amiss?
Yeah, I used to do these things where I would actually like I would just like disappear for like 2 or 3 months, you know, because see, my name too, like I knew in Northern Virginia, not everybody knew my last name, but everybody knew Seth, right? Because that, you know, I mean, I know they got like Seth Rogen and all these people now with Seth, but back then in the late 80s, I mean, there was hardly anybody named Seth. You know, this has been like more like in the 90s and 2000s, this name has been more commonplace. So I knew people knew my name, so I would, you know, kind of go take 2 months, like, when my case was developing, I was actually in Hawaii for 2 months, you know, because I felt like it was a little hot because they had a bust at UVA. You know, it was like one of those busts like where the DEA, where they went in on like a high profile college fraternity at UVA, and they didn't really get anything. You know, they got like, you know, some bongs, some scales, a few hits of acid or whatever, but that acid was from me. You know, so people started mentioning my name.
I
So
was gonna say, these college kids are gonna start chirping. Oh, where'd you
yeah.
get this from, Seth?
Yeah, so you know, but a lot of these people were so far removed because I insulated myself. You know, like the bigger I got, I insulated myself. I always did like I would basically deal with like 5 people, you know, and through them, you know, I would even tell them sometimes because I knew the people who did the stuff. Maybe I even went to school with them, but you know, like I say, we might all 3 know each other. We all deal drugs. I'm the source, but I don't want to fuck with you because I don't like the way you move. So everything goes through you. You know what I'm saying?
So one point of contact, that way you lessen the chance of that spider web.
Yeah.
That's the way we develop CIs, confidential informants, in our job. You deal with some of people are trying to get out of jail, so they're not always totally
Stay
upfront.
out of jail too.
They're not always totally upfront, but you deal with one CI because when you have that net of CIs and they all know about each other, they're going to start working against you.
Yeah, I would try to compartmentalize too. Basically, that's what I would do. I would compartmentalize. I didn't want this person to know this person was doing. I didn't want this person to know how much this person was moving. You know, and then my biggest thing, because look, I didn't carry a gun or anything. You know, like I was not like a criminal organization. I was basically like a freelance
One man show.
Yeah, entrepreneur, and I used to drive around, and I always had drugs, money, you know, in my car, you know, and I had different stash houses at different places. But and back then, you know, we didn't have cell phones back then, but we had like the 1-800 beeper. That was like, I had the 1-800 beeper, you know, so I was like big time. They'd have those big brick phones, but they were like so expensive. I didn't have one of those. I think they were going for like $2,000 back then.
Plus
they were
$9 for a phone call.
They were just so big. So I just had the 1-800 beeper, but that was my biggest deterrent against like getting robbed or, you know, against, you know, someone like, you know, pulling up on me or even like somebody narking me out and finding me out. I was the type of dude, like I might be 30 minutes from Morgantown, but you know, the dudes are beeping me like, hey, we got your money. When are you going to come through? You know, and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be there in 2 days. And I know I'm going to be there. I'm like half hour away.
So they don't have time to set up. That's good.
Yeah. So that was like, you know, I used a lot of misdirection, you know, and then sometimes like dudes would be hitting me and I would just show up. Like I wouldn't even let them know when I'm coming. I would just show up, you know, because I had like all these different colleges. I had like dudes I went to high school with, so they got all these different party houses, and I had like keys to all the houses because most of them I paid rent, and I paid their phone bills because when I would get to these places, I would talk on their phones like crazy long distance because that's how I did all my business. You know, it was never like in a phone. My
Like
phone.
I said, we had no cell phones or
So I would go.
booth.
Yeah, I would might have a girl at a college, or I'd be at my friend's party house, and I would be running their phone bill up like $200-300 a month. You know,
as long as you're paying it.
Yeah, they didn't care. But you know, so it wasn't my name because I used to use payphones a lot too. So, you know, I would try to. Nobody knows now.
What are they? My
yeah.
son saw one. My 12-year-old saw one the other day. He goes, "Dad, what's that?" And I said, "Well, that's how we used to get our drugs."
Yeah.
No,
I used to have like I used to write it down. So there'd be banks of payphones, you know, at these different colleges, and you know where I had different stash houses, and I would have the numbers written down, and I would have a number like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So basically, I could call somebody that was somewhere else, and I could be like, "Oh, hit me on." I wouldn't even have to say the number because I would give them. I would write it out for them. You know, the dudes I was working with, and I would give them these lists, and I'd be like, "Well, hit me a number 1 in West Virginia." And they know, you know, they dial the number. Then I talk to them because sometimes you got to go wait. They got to wait till they go to a payphone, and then you always got to have a lot of quarters too.
That's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
That's a lot of moving parts. Did you ever get the paranoia ever set in? You sound like you're insulating yourself pretty good.
Not when I was doing it. No, I mean, because I just like the whole war on drugs thing, right? Because look, so the war on drugs really started popping off, like around 87, 88. I guess that's when they changed the laws. And
Nancy Reagan, right? Just say no.
yeah, but what they were, it was like the I don't know, called the omnibus crime, but I think Joe Biden was like, the architect of it. But it was at first, because in the 80s, it was the crack era, and all the narco terrorism. So, looking back now, our country, rightly so or not rightly so, I think, and even like in New York, like cops were getting shot by crack dealers. They had the Edward Byrne case.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Where they just
Byrne.
went up and executed this rookie cop. He was just like, watching a witness's house. So, I mean, there was a lot of fear in government because they saw what was happening over here with the crack. And they were like, they didn't want it to be like Pablo Escobar, like Colombia, the narco terrorism, because that stuff was huge in the 80s, and look, Pablo Escobar almost took over Colombia. I mean, Pablo Escobar bombed a plane out of the fucking sky to kill a fucking a political guy.
But what they never realize is pot and LSD are far different than crack.
Oh yeah, no, but
Without doubt.
so they made these laws though because of the crack and because they didn't want this narco terrorism, which was funded by money to take over, and they saw all these guys in the hood. So they made these laws, reactive, rightly so or not rightly so. I mean, it depends on who tells the story, but they were just basically going after all the black guys in the hood for the first 3 or 4 years when they made these laws, and that's who the people were being targeted. Some because they deserved it, and some because they were just there.
They weren't looking at Seth, the white dude.
Yeah, but then
Well, you don't fit the profile. I'm sorry, you just don't.
yeah. So I never thought, and like I say, I lived outside DC, so I saw all this stuff going on, but I just never thought because I knew dudes older than me that were like big weed dealers, and they had started businesses and all types of stuff, and that was kind of like my plan. I wanted to become a cash millionaire by the time I was 25. That was my plan, and I was going to have all these different businesses, and funnel all my drug money into them and fund them. So I never had the inclination that I could even get caught. First off, I thought I was too smart to get caught, but second off, I didn't think I would ever be targeted. But after the inner cities getting hit so hard with these drug war laws, for like 3 or 4 years, then people started claiming racism. And I mean, we can look back now, we can say, yeah, a lot of these laws were racist, in a lot of ways. But that's when like the DEA and the feds said like, okay, well, we're going to bust white drug dealers too, to make it seem like we're not racist. So that's what they did. I was in that first wave. My case was 91. So that was the first wave when they went out to the suburbs, and they started getting the weed dealers and LSD. Because, I mean, basically, they got big coke dealers out in the suburbs too. But I think anybody, like if you're dealing with like coke, heroin, meth, those guys are getting popped because there's a lot of violence associated with the trade. There's a lot of money. But the marijuana and psychedelics, that trade, like I came up under the Grateful Dead, right? So the Grateful Dead, there's a bunch of people that follow the Grateful Dead around.
Oh,
they call
yeah.
them deadheads, right?
Deadheads, yeah.
And so
Follow them around the country.
yeah, and a lot of them, like that's what they deal. They deal marijuana, and they deal LSD, they deal mushrooms, right? But they call them families, right? And I always thought it was weird because they call them families. They don't call them criminal organizations. So I think there's like a big difference. Like somebody that's involved in like marijuana, LSD it's even though could say okay, yeah, you could brand it as a criminal organization, but it's not the same. It's not the mafia. It's not like these, these crack drug lords, these Colombians, where, because if you snitch in a Grateful Dead family, you just get ostracized. You don't get killed.
Right.
You don't get to go to the next show.
Yeah. You just, no, everybody stops fucking with you.
Right.
But no, nobody's getting killed. It's not like, the bikers or the mafia or, these other drug lords, like the Mexican cartels now, you snitch.
You're dead.
Yeah.
Your family's dead.
Yeah.
Your cousins are dead. But there had to be that so I guess a come to Jesus moment where they were on you, and what was that feeling like?
Yeah. So I knew, I was in Hawaii, and like there was like some little bus like on the state level, and like shit was getting fucked up, and like some of my guys, like dudes I went to high school with, that were supposed to be working together, it seemed like dudes were snitching on each other, and I'm just chilling out. I'm basically waiting for the fall because I would make my money in the fall when they harvested the weed. I made the most money like on like what we call the kind bud, like the good weed that they would grow in this country. So I come back, I cut my Hawaii trip short, and I come back, and really, like in retrospect, it was one of the stupidest things I ever did. So I come back, and I'm like walking basically right into a hornet's nest. You know, they got like and it kind of went from that UVA case, that University of Virginia case, and they kept investigating. It kept spiraling, and they kept getting more people because a lot of people knew who I was, you know. And then it was also the summertime, so everybody was back from college in Fairfax County. You know, that's where Robinson High School. You know, that's where my parents lived, and that's where like I had a couple different houses. You know, and where I was basically ran my operations from. So everybody was back, and it was like the summer of '91 too. And it was like, you know, back then, like nobody would think about that now, but back then, like sometimes in the summer, especially like 88, 89, 90, 91, like it would be so dry for weed. Like you couldn't even get any weed, you know, because, you know, the harvest would only be for like maybe 3 months in the fall. And then the Mexican brick pot was coming, you know, but like they were doing a lot of stuff on the border. So that stuff wasn't always coming in. So, you know, I even remember like on the East Coast, like the law enforcement would put up like, you think they would put up billboards, like, you know, referring to weed, like you think it's dry now, wait till this summer. You know, they would be like billboards up like that, you know, but, yeah, so I kind of come back into this hornet's nest, you know, and there's no weed, and like shit's kind of fucking up, you know, like a couple little different busts, and all I'm thinking is I need to get my money up for the fall because that's when I'm gonna make a killing, you know, because I was basically making like $1,000 a pound off that good weed, you know. But you had to come with the money because they just do these little grows like 20, 30 pounds. So, you know, you got to come with like 20 or 30 grand and just buy the farmers out, you know. And I would go see like every fall, I would go see like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 farmers, you know. So I'm coming back, cut my trip short from Hawaii. I come back and I have no idea. I'm like basically walking into the hornet's nest. You know, there's already an investigation started. They don't know my full name, but they kind of got an idea who I am, you know, and because, you know, everybody's saying everything's from me. And then I did another real stupid mistake because it was so dry, there was no weed, so I couldn't get any weed to sell. So I just like I flooded the whole Northern Virginia with like acid, like just like so. And this is how much I flooded. So when I first started bringing LSD into Northern Virginia and into the East Coast, like, you know, 87, 88, it would probably be like $15 a hit, maybe up $20 a hit. By this time, like 91, it's like $2-3 a hit.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying? And
over flooded it.
yeah, it saturated it. And all my people from college, they're all in the same place, and everybody, you know, because we're all trying to gear up for the fall because we know that's when we can make the money with the good weed when they harvest. So everybody's trying to get their money up. And so everybody's trying to sell acid. So it was just saturated. And then they had this other thing that happened. Actually, in Fairfax County, there's this area called Clifton. It's like all these like back then it was all these $1 million homes, like, you know, big, you know, I don't know, maybe like 5 acres. But, you know, like all kids in the suburbs, you know, when the parents are gone, you know, we throw parties. So they had this big field party in Clifton, and like we would bring in stages, we would bring in like skate ramps, and there might be like 500, you know, 600 people there, and it'd be out on this 5 acres, you know, in this field behind the house. And, you know, inevitably, you know, later at night, the cops would get called. So the cops would come in, and it was just everybody was tripping on acid, right? So there was this one 15-year-old kid, he was like running naked through the woods, like tripping on acid, you know, having a bad trip, or I don't know, whatever. And, you know, a cop was chasing him. The cop grabbed him, you know, tackled him. And this kid somehow managed to take the cop's gun out, and he shot him in the arm.
Oh no!
So once that happened,
Now
then
all eyes are on you.
Then it was like, you know, and like I say, this from my point of view, you know, I can see law enforcement's point of view too, but from my point of view, it was basically like a LSD witch hunt. You know, like they were just going hard. So they brought the DEA in, and like I say, some other people had been investigating all this different stuff on the state level and the federal level. And then, you know, at this point, once one of their own got shot, and like I say, I mean, you know, dude didn't get killed or nothing, but you know, it was a flesh wound. But I'm sure, you know, I've never got shot in the arm, but I'm sure it's not very pleasant.
Sure, it's gotta hurt.
You know, so, you know, I'm not discounting it or downplaying it, but yeah, so they started this investigation, and actually the dude who sold that kid, because that kid, he told him where he got the LSD from. So the dude that sold it to him was actually a dude at one time. He was like one of my real good friends, but this is way back, probably like 4 years ago when we were like freshmen, our sophomores. So he was very far removed from me, but they got him, and then he kind of took him up the chain, and the chain eventually led to me, and then, like I say, it was crazy. So from when that happened, like maybe in June, like when I was in Hawaii, and then I got back, I kind of walk into this, and then like July, August '91, it's like crazy, like everybody I talk to, it's like, oh, the DEA is coming, the state narcotics people are coming, and they're asking about you. So I'm like hearing this for like 2 months. At the same time, I'm trying to, sell as much acid. I got all this acid in the area, and I'm just trying to like get rid of it. I'm trying to dump it because my whole goal is still like by September, I want to get as much cash as possible so I can buy this weed and make money. And yeah, it was a bad situation on my part. And like I say, I had no idea of the federal laws, or that they were coming out, to the suburbs, or that they were actively looking for cases, out there. And in retrospect, it was really stupid of me. If I would have had some type of intuition or some type of foresight, I could have maybe just disappeared or whatever. But I just kept doing my thing, and they eventually found me, and I got indicted federally.
How much they catch you with?
I got caught with nothing.
You got caught with nothing. It was just what you sold.
But it was just the case that was built up.
They caught somebody else with like 120 sheets, which is basically like 12,000 hits acid.
Wow. And
so and granted, I mean, it was mine.
But you didn't have it.
At one point, it was yours.
Possession is 9/10 of the law, and it didn't seem like you had possession of it.
I never got caught with, I got 25 years in prison. I never got caught with any drugs.
Well, stop.
Never got caught with any money.
Stop for a second.
Yeah.
So you got caught with no drugs. You got caught with no drugs. They gave you 25 years. Did you piss somebody off?
Well, yeah, no, I did, because I took off. I was a fugitive for 2 years. So
No kidding.
yeah, I took off. I was U.S. Marshals top 15 most wanted list.
Well, what'd that feel like inside when you were on the run, that anxiety?
I'd say the first 6 months, man, I was kind of paranoid because, like when the feds come in and kind of crash your world like that, and they get to everybody, and you just think like they're like this universal eye in the sky, and
Big Brother's watching.
Yeah, and I mean, really, it's not like that. I mean, yeah. At some level, I mean, there's probably people that can do that, but it's not like the DEA doesn't have that type of capability, or the local narcotics officers don't have that type of capability. But yeah. So when I went on the run, like the first 6 months, I was like super paranoid, man, because I thought like they could track me. Now, I mean, they could track you with the phone, but back then I had different ID and everything. I was just like super paranoid because they kind of collapsed my whole world.
What was this?
That's what I was going to say. When you were on a run, you couldn't go back to your old friends.
No, I cut off time with basically everyone.
You couldn't go to your crash houses. Would you just go from hotel to hotel, or?
No, I just went out. I went out to California, and I actually got a place right in Hollywood. And I hung out there for 6 months.
So you fit right in.
Hang out with all the other drug dealers.
No, but your parents, being a military kid, your father's a Marine. That's got to be tough. Like, what was their reaction when you get caught? Now, when you went on the run, before you answer that, did you already know what time you're looking at?
Yeah, I was looking at 20 to life. Yeah,
20 to life. What did your parents say to that?